The private dining room glowed under a chandelier, a long table set for 20. Joshua Whitmore rose, champagne flute in hand. His smile was polished and sharp.
To Mom, may this be your final year of struggling with the burdens of running the estate. We're here for you.
An uneasy ripple of laughter crossed the table. Guests exchanged confused glances.
My final year? The champagne flute quivered in her grip.
She scanned the room, her polite smile hardening into something sharper. At a small table against the wall, Dr. Stephen Aldridge watched in complete silence. Her cardiologist.
I didn't invite him. The realization hit her chest like a stone.
She kept the practiced smile, but under the tablecloth, her fingers curled into a fist.
This wasn't a coincidence. Something was deeply wrong.
Under the cover of clinking glasses and uneasy chatter, Barbara leaned toward her sister-in-law, her voice barely a whisper.
Martha, who invited Dr. Stephen Aldridge tonight. I need to know.
Aunt Martha set down her fork, confusion flickering in her eyes.
I assumed you had, Barbara. He's your cardiologist. Why would anyone else invite him?
Barbara's smile stayed fixed, tight as a surgeon's suture, but her pulse hammered against her ribs. Neither of them had invited him. She slipped her phone from her clutch, keeping it beneath the tablecloth. The screen glowed. 3 missed calls this week from Cardiology Associates.
She stared at the log. She hadn't called that office in months, not since her last annual checkup. Then Joshua's recent questions flooded back. So casual, so pointed. How was she sleeping? Had she updated her will?
The pieces locked into place with sickening precision. Joshua had been calling her doctor, probing, prying into her medical files.
Joshua's voice echoed in her mind. The estate is too much for you alone, Mom. You need help.
He had said it with that same polished smile he wore tonight, a smile that now felt like a razor's edge. 6 months ago, he had asked about updating her will, citing estate planning efficiency.
Last month, he probed again. Have you considered a reverse mortgage? Just in case.
His business ventures had been failing. His debts were mounting, though he never admitted it aloud.
Now he raised a toast to her final year, as if he had already penciled in her funeral date.
The memory of his father's empty garage, the tools untouched, filled her with a cold dread.
He was planning something terrible. Something irreversible.
The manila folder in Dr. Stephen's hands suddenly seemed like a key, not a mystery.
She had to know what was inside, but not yet. Not here.
Barbara watched Joshua drift toward the small table near the wall, his champagne flute clutched too tightly. He leaned in, speaking to Dr. Stephen, his gestures jerky, his smile twitching. The doctor nodded once, expression unreadable, hands folded on the folder.
He's checking if the doctor will keep quiet. Her stomach nodded.
The main course arrived, but the food tasted like cardboard. Laughter around her sounded hollow.
She had to wait. If she confronted him now, in front of everyone, he'd twist it.
She would pull him aside after dessert, in the hallway, where no one could hear. Joshua returned to his seat, avoiding her gaze, sweat sheening his temples.
Just a few more courses. Then she would have the truth.
A screech of audio feedback sliced through the room. A server handed Dr. Stephen a microphone. Dr. Stephen rose slowly, the microphone cord trailing like a fuse. All heads turned.
I apologize for the intrusion, but I believe there is something Barbara needs to hear tonight.
The clinking of silverware ceased. Even the waitstaff paused mid-step.
Her heart thudded against her sternum. This was the moment she both dreaded and needed.
I came this evening because I thought you should know what your son has been requesting from my office.
Joshua's champagne flute slipped from his fingers and shattered on the hardwood floor.
Stephen, we agreed. This is a private family matter.
No, Joshua. I never agreed to your request, and now your mother deserves the truth.
The room dissolved into hushed gasps and shifting chairs. Aunt Martha's reading glasses clattered to the table.
She gripped the edge of the table, every nerve on fire. The folder was about to open.
Barbara walked toward the doctor, her shadow lengthening under the chandelier. Dr. Stephen extended the folder without a word. Her fingers trembled as she flipped it open. A single typed letter lay inside, her son's signature scrawled at the bottom. The letter began, "I, Joshua Whitmore, respectfully request a terminal prognosis for my mother, Barbara Whitmore, estimating she has fewer than 12 months to live."
Her blood turned to ice. He hadn't just wished her dead. He had tried to manufacture a death certificate in advance.
The letter detailed a hardship loan application, using her terminal prognosis as collateral against the estate. He had already started the paperwork.
He was going to kill me on paper and steal everything.
Joshua stumbled backward, his face a ghastly white. He looked at the door, but there was nowhere to run. The guests sat paralyzed, a collective intake of breath. Aunt Martha covered her mouth with both hands.
She had to speak. The room was waiting, but the words were daggers in her throat.
Mom, it's not what it looks like. Just a contingency plan for your own good.
A contingency plan? You asked my own doctor to sign a death warrant, Joshua.
The bank required documentation. I was going to pay it back once the estate transferred. You wouldn't even have noticed.
Ethan shot up from his chair, his fists balled, his young face contorted with disgust.
You were going to bankrupt her before she was even in the ground.
After everything she's done for you, you ungrateful snake.
The room erupted into a storm of accusations, but Barbara raised her hand, and a heavy silence fell once more.
I have only one more thing to say to you tonight, Joshua.
Joshua opened his mouth, but no words came. He was a cornered animal, eyes darting for an escape.
This boy is about to learn what his mother is truly made of.
Barbara drew a steadying breath and held the letter so everyone could see.
My son asked my doctor to sign a terminal prognosis, less than a year, so he could borrow against my estate.
He called my office multiple times, asking me to sign. I refused every time. That's why I came here tonight.
A unified gasp swept the room. Forks clattered. Some guests covered their faces.
He planned to use that false prognosis to drain my equity before I even knew.
I have the phone records and his written request. I will provide them to anyone who asks.
Joshua shrank into his chair, his face a blotchy mask of humiliation.
You schemed to bury your own mother for cash. There is no bar low enough for you.
The room surged with furious whispers, but Barbara raised the letter like a scepter, and silence fell again.
I believe that concludes the business portion of this evening. I have one more matter to settle with my son.
Joshua lurched forward, falling to his knees before his mother, his voice cracking like a child's.
I am drowning, Mom. The debts, the business. I was going to lose everything. I didn't know what else to do.
A few relatives exchanged uneasy glances, pity warring with revulsion in their eyes.
Spare us the waterworks, Joshua. You didn't cry when you were signing that letter.
The sight of her grown son weeping at her feet twisted something inside her.
She stepped back, pressing a hand to her temple, and walked toward the window, away from the table. Ethan started to follow, but she raised a hand without turning around, silently stopping him.
If she looked at him now, she might crumble. She couldn't afford to crumble.
Joshua remained on the floor, his sobs filling the suffocating silence. The guests averted their eyes.
She had written the new will that morning. Now, she had to use it.
She walked into the coat room and slid her hand into her clutch. Her fingers closed around a thick, sealed envelope. That morning, in her lawyer's office, she had signed the documents, her pen shaking only slightly. The new will left the entire estate, the house, the investments, everything, to her grandchildren, in trust. The final clause read, "To my son, Joshua Whitmore, I leave nothing, having provided for him during my lifetime."
She had hoped it was only precaution, Joshua's desperation, not betrayal. The folder destroyed that hope.
Back in the present, She broke the envelope seal and slid the will out just enough to see her signature.
I hoped I'd never need this.
She folded the will, tucked it back into the envelope, and pressed her palm flat against it, steadying her breathing.
This was not revenge. This was protection of her grandchildren, of everything she and her husband had built.
She walked back toward the dining room, the envelope a cold weight in her hands. The party, and Joshua, waited. As Barbara crossed the threshold, every conversation died. All eyes fixed on the envelope in her hand. She walked to the head of the table, her heels echoing on the wood, and raised the envelope high.
Joshua, this is what I came here with tonight. A decision I made before you ever lifted your glass.
The envelope caught the chandelier light, stark white against her burgundy sleeve. Joshua's face swung from confusion to terror. He knew without knowing. Aunt Martha leaned forward, her eyes sharp as cut crystal. Ethan's hands became fists.
I had it drawn up this morning. Open it.
She tossed the envelope onto the table in front of him. It landed with a slap that echoed. Joshua stared at it as if it were a coiled snake. The room held its breath. Ethan's jaw was set. Aunt Martha's mouth was a thin line. Everyone waited.
Mom, please, not here. Let's do this in private. Just the two of us.
Barbara's face was stone. She said nothing, only pointed at the envelope.
I am begging you, Mom. At least let me explain before you do this.
You already explained with a toast to my final year. Now open it or I will.
Some guests looked away, embarrassed. Others watched like it was a car crash, horrified but unable to turn from it. Joshua's fingers were ice as they closed around the envelope. He held it like it might explode.
Now.
He slid a finger under the flap, tearing it with a sound like a scream in the silence. He pulled out the document, a single sheet of crisp legal paper. His eyes widened as he read the first line. The entire room seemed to lean forward. Every breath held as Joshua's world ended in black and white. Joshua scanned the will, his face crumpling line by line. His lips shaped the words that destroyed him.
This can't be. You disinherited me. There's nothing? Not a single cent.
The words seared into him. To my son Joshua, I leave nothing.
You can't throw me away like this. I am your son, your only child. This isn't legal.
His hands shook violently, the paper rattling, knuckles bone white.
I already did, Joshua. It was signed this morning. It's irrevocable. You get nothing.
He dropped the will as if it had burned him, the paper floating onto the table.
I'll contest it. You can't just cut me out. I have rights. I'll sue.
But his voice cracked, pathetic. The fight drained out of him before it began. The room was silent, every face a mask of disbelief. Joshua's legacy had just been erased. Joshua's face twisted, veins bulging. He pointed a shaking finger at Barbara.
You always hated me. You loved Ethan more since he was born. This was just your excuse.
His hands clawed at the air, as if he could pull back his inheritance with sheer fury.
You did this, Joshua. Not me, not Ethan. You signed that letter and sealed your own fate.
Ethan stepped closer to his grandmother, his arm shielding her from Joshua's tirade.
You are not going near her again. You've done enough.
For heaven's sake, someone remove this disgrace from the premises.
Joshua looked around the room, desperate for an ally, but every face was stone. The silence was louder than any scream. The family had fractured, and the wound was raw.
Please call the maitre d'. My son is leaving, now.
The maitre d' had been waiting by the door, his expression carved from professional stone. At Barbara's command, he nodded once. He spoke into a small radio. 2 additional staff appeared, their faces grim. Joshua saw them and lunged for Barbara, but Ethan blocked his path, and the staff seized his arms.
Get your hands off me. You can't do this. This is my party too.
He thrashed, sending a crystal vase crashing to the floor. Water pooled like spilled tears. The staff dragged him toward the door, his heels skidding on the polished wood.
You'll regret this. I'll drag this family through every court in the state.
The maitre d' opened the double doors. Cold air rushed in. Joshua's screams faded as he was hauled outside. The door clicked shut. The silence that followed was absolute. Barbara stood motionless, her face a mask. The birthday celebration had been shattered, but she was still standing. Barbara slowly exhaled, the sound thin and brittle in the quiet. She smoothed the front of her burgundy dress with deliberate care. Her gaze drifted to the untouched birthday cake on a silver trolley in the corner, candles unlit, waiting.
They didn't come here to see her grieve. They came to celebrate. Ethan, I think we could all use some cake, don't you?
Ethan's grip on her hand tightened. He nodded, a flicker of a smile breaking through his worry. She gestured to the maitre d', who slipped out and returned with the cake trolley, now topped with a single lit candle. The guests stirred. Someone let out a nervous laugh, then another. The tension thawed, inch by inch.
Please, everyone sit. Let's not let this evening end on a bitter note.
Chairs scraped. Whispers restarted. The party was not over. It was just beginning again. She caught Ethan's eye and mouthed, "Thank you." He smiled, and for a moment, she looked every bit the matriarch she was. The silver trolley rolled to the center of the room, its single candle flickering like a captive star. Barbara watched the flame, her reflection tiny and bright in its whisper.
No wish. She already had what she needed. Truth, proof, and the power to protect her family.
With a soft, deliberate breath, she extinguished the candle. Smoke curled toward the chandelier.
Well, it's about time we had something sweet to celebrate.
Laughter bounced off the walls, and applause broke out, sweeping away the tension.
Happy birthday, Grandma. You were incredible tonight.
I had a good teacher, Ethan, but tonight, you were the strength I needed.
He hugged her, and the guests cheered. Someone shouted, "Speech," but Barbara shook her head, smiling. The forks began to clink on plates. The night had been broken, but it was mending. Barbara was still here. She had won. As the last fork settled, Barbara pushed back her chair and rose. She extended her hand toward Ethan.
Dance with your grandmother. It would mean the world.
Ethan's grin broke through, and he took her hand without hesitation. They moved to the cleared floor, the chandelier dimming as a waiter cued a slow, nostalgic tune. The first notes of "Smoke Gets in Your Eyes" filled the room. Barbara closed her eyes for a beat. Guests turned in their chairs, some dabbing their eyes with napkins. Aunt Martha smiled, a rare soft thing. Barbara leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder, and they swayed, 2 generations woven together. She thought of her husband, of nights like this when they were young. The music carried her. Ethan whispered something that made her laugh, a real laugh, bright and unguarded. As the song ended, they stood still, holding on. The room erupted in applause, the sound cleansing. Barbara pulled Ethan into a tight embrace, her silver hair brushing his cheek.
She thought of her husband, how he would have loved this. Her, still standing, still fighting.
In her mind, she saw a faded photograph, her and Walter on their wedding day, young and invincible. She whispered something only Ethan could hear, her voice thick with tears she refused to shed.
He would be so proud of you. And of me.
Ethan's arms tightened. The applause faded to a murmur as guests began gathering their coats. Barbara released him and looked around the room. Room, her family, her victory.
She had done the hardest thing a mother could do, and she was still whole, still herself.
One by one, relatives came to kiss her cheek and wish her well. The evening was ending, but not her story. She walked to the window and looked out at the Boston night, the envelope with the will still in her clutch, a quiet sentinel. Later that night, the Whitmore house stood silent under the stars. Barbara slipped off her heels in the foyer. She walked into the study and knelt by the filing cabinet, The key turned with a familiar click. The envelope with the new will slid into the drawer, next to old tax returns and her marriage certificate. She crossed to the piano and picked up a silver frame, Walter's favorite photograph from their 40th anniversary.
Her thumb traced his smile. Even in a photo, his eyes held that steady calm.
She carried the frame upstairs and stood at the bedroom window, the city lights distant and soft. The night was clear. Stars pricked through the velvet sky. She felt Walter's presence, quiet and sure.
The weight that had pressed on her for 2 years, since his death, since Joshua's greed, lifted. She was free. The estate was protected. Her grandchildren would inherit everything she and Walter had built.
For the first time in years, Barbara Whitmore took a breath that filled her entire lungs. She was still here, and she had won. Spring returned, and Barbara knelt in her garden, the earth cool beneath her knees. She planted roses the color of her burgundy dress, a quiet tribute to that fateful birthday. Ethan came every Sunday, helping her into the car for church or a drive along the coast. He never missed a week. They talked about Walter, about the estate, about the future that was now secure. A calendar on her study wall marked her 87th year with a bold red circle. At her 87th birthday dinner, she sat at the head of the table. Great-grandchildren spilling onto her lap, she told them stories of Walter, of the tough years, and of a birthday when a cardiologist stood up with a folder. A grandchild asked, "Were you scared, Grandma?" She smiled. "Only for a moment, then I remembered who I was." They snapped a selfie, her in the center, surrounded by the family she protected, all laughing. The calendar fluttered to the floor. 12 more birthdays had come and gone since that night, and she was still here. She lived 12 more years, never forgetting that birthday when her cardiologist stood up with a folder. Joshua was never seen at family gatherings again. His name became a quiet shadow. Barbara's last will stood. Her grandchildren flourished, and her heart, once broken, beat stronger than ever. The house on Oakwood Drive stayed full of laughter, but one photograph always rested, face down on her dresser. It was Joshua's, from a Christmas, long before greed took hold. She never discarded it, a reminder of who she had been and who she had to become. In the end, Barbara Whitmore did not need a terminal prognosis. She needed a cardiologist with a folder, a grandson with a steady hand, and the courage to draw a line. She got all three, and she lived, fully, fiercely, until the candles on her 87th cake finally guttered, and on her dresser, a photograph remained turned down, a silent testament to the cost of love and justice.